Madam Superintendent, can you proceed with the review of our budget, our calendar, please?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. And segueing into the next item, which is related to proposed calendars, it's important to note, not for the 2020 fall year we were just discussing in season 4, but for the 2021-2022 school year. You may recall, board members, that just prior to our closure for COVID, Dr. Teigen presented to you 2 calendar options, one being a traditional school year start and one being a pre-Labor Day start that surfaced from the calendar committee that had been working on this endeavor. And then, of course, we also presented our intent to gather a good bit of community input and feedback related to that pre-Labor Day start. And so given the current situation that we're in, I retracted that initial proposal. And so instead, administration wanted to put forward the traditional calendar, given some of the challenges in getting a good bit of community discussion and input around anything that would be a departure from our traditional calendar, specifically a pre-Labor Day start. So that is what we are prepared to discuss with you this afternoon, but also in response to some excellent board member questions. Given the circumstances related to COVID, the desire to look at alternative calendars that may help us to better meet the needs of our students given the impacts of COVID, a request was made to look once again at that pre-Labor Day start calendar, as well as what an extended year calendar might look like. And since our committee had developed all of those scenarios as potentials, they've been shared with the board in preparation for this meeting. And so I'll turn it over to Dr. Teigen to take us through a discussion of those. Dr. Teigen?
Absolutely. And if I can take a little liberty here to take a sidestep to the to next year's calendar, just before we get into the following year's calendar. I wanted to share just a slight modification to next year's calendar. With November 3rd that is Election Day, and it is currently slated for a half day of professional learning and a half day of clerical work. And as we talk about professional learning, it's not always sitting in front of a presenter working. There are other ways, but we want to be very clear on Election Day that staff does not need to be in schools. And so we're just going to change that day to make sure that it's indicated as a full clerical day on our 2020-2021 calendar. And so with that said, and the introduction with Dr. Cashwell, we'll move on with the presentation. So on the afternoon of March 12th, I stood before you to share 2 versions of the 2021-22 school calendar, a pre-Labor Day and a post-Labor Day option. I had worked collaboratively with the Chief of Communications and Community Engagement to develop a plan that provided multiple opportunities for our staff, families, and community to engage in the conversation about a pre-Labor Day start. There were morning, afternoon, and evening events planned across the county. That evening, Henrico County Schools notified our staff and families that we would be shut down for 2 weeks beginning on Monday, March 16th. That very day, Governor Northam ordered all Virginia K-12 schools closed for at least 2 weeks. Then just a little over a week later, on March 23rd, the governor announced an extended school closure of K-12 schools through the end of the year. At this point, we knew we would no longer be able to engage staff and community in discussions around a pre-Labor Day start. As schools and families grappled with the closing of schools and daycares, the calendar for 2021-2022 was not pressing. Detailing the consequences of a pandemic were paramount. However, school and families are now planning for the summer of 2021-2022, pushing plans from this summer to next summer. Given the unknowns for the upcoming school year and the impact that may have on the following school year, staff is sharing the 3 options for the 2021-2022 school year that resulted from the work of the calendar committee. The first 2 were shared at the May 12th school board meeting. That's the pre-Labor Day and post-Labor Day. Given the uncertainties of closures moving forward and the subsequent need for closing learning gaps, An extended year calendar is also being shared as a third option. This was an option originally brought forward from the calendar committee in the fall. It was dismissed as a possibility at that time due to the opening of 2 new schools in the 2021-2022 school years. That's actually 3 schools if you include the addition onto holiday. Given the current conditions and with the potential of future school closures leading to even greater learning gaps, we just wanted the board to have an opportunity to look at all the options that are available. And I would be remiss if I did not share that staff does feel that we can adequately address learning gaps with any of the 3 calendar options. So for the first one is the pre-Labor Day version is shown here. I know it's more easily seen online and it's listed as version A. Staff would report to work on Monday, hold on, I've got to make sure. I've got something, give me just 1 second. Staff would report on Monday. This is the pre-Labor Day. Okay, I'm sorry. I confused myself in the order of these. Staff would report for teachers.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but is there any way to make this larger? I know you might be able to, but it is very hard to see.
I believe what we're seeing is different than what the public is seeing, and that's the full screen version. What we're seeing is much smaller, and unfortunately, I don't know that there's a way in this view to make it larger.
Okay, all right.
So it may be something you could pull up in board docs on your screen instead. I'm sorry about that.
That's okay.
So this is the pre-Labor Day version, and staff would report to work for Teacher Work Week on Monday, August 16th. Students would report to school on Monday, August 23rd, and the last day of school would be Friday, June 3rd. The student holidays for that year would include September 3rd and 6th for the Labor Day weekend as required by Virginia state law. In addition, there would be, and I will tell you, these holidays are consistent now from here. I'll tell you when we stop, but they are consistent for all calendar versions. September 16th would be a student holiday in observance of Yom Kippur, October 11th for Columbus Day, November 2nd for Election Day, November 4th for Diwali, November 24th through 26th for Thanksgiving, December 20th through the 31st for Christmas and winter break, April 4th through 8th for spring break, April 18th for Easter, May 3rd for Eid al-Fitr, and May 30th for Memorial Day. The calendar would include 3 anytime, anywhere learning days that we now know we can do quite well and bring the total number of student days to 180. The post-Labor Day version that's shown here and is known as version B, the teachers would report for Teacher Work Week on Monday, August 31st. Students would report to school on Wednesday, September 8th, as September 7th is Rosh Hashanah. The last day for students would be Friday, June 17th. Again, the student holidays would be the same, and there are 3 anytime, anywhere learning days to bring the total number of days to 180. In the third version, the extended year version is version C. Staff would report for Teacher Work Week on Monday, July 19th. Students would report to school the following Monday, July 26th. And the last day for students would be Friday, June 17th. What is different about this calendar is that it includes intersessions, and these intersessions provide the ability to close achievement gaps throughout the year while simultaneously reducing the summer slide. The summer break would be 4 weeks long. The intersession periods are shown in orange and are September 27th through October 8th, June 3rd through the 14th, thereby it's tied to the winter break, and March 21st through April 1st being tied to spring break. If we pursue, the student calendar would include 5 anytime, anywhere learning days to bring the total number of days to 180. And I'm happy to answer any questions. I will say that while these 3 calendars are very different versions of the same basic components, I know there's limited opportunity to gather feedback from our staff and families before we would adopt a version on May 28th. And so I know that staff still recommends the post-Labor Day start as would be the preference. But as always, happy to hear questions and feedback from the board.
Thank you so much, Dr. Tigan. Let me begin with Mrs. Shea.
Thank you so much. And I have quite a few questions that are calendar and comments that are calendar related. So I appreciate your patience with me. My first is a request. I know we have a shorter window for community input, but I would really like a survey to go out to our families. I think it is imperative that we have public input, especially on this issue and especially during this time. Over the last 8 weeks, we have received numerous requests from constituents to consider additional calendar options, which is what we're doing. I've also noticed a lot of the conversation around calendar preferences shifting pre-COVID versus post-COVID. And speaking with some board members in neighboring districts, they've noticed the same thing too. So I think now, even more than any other year, it's absolutely imperative that we gain stakeholder feedback. And so even if that window is shorter and not optimal, I would really love for the team to put together some sort of survey to go out to our stakeholders next week.
Absolutely.
And then next I have a handful of questions, mostly centered around the extended calendar, the extended year calendar. You know, I have to admit, as a mom of young children, frankly, that calendar would work very well for my family. And as a teacher, what I specifically taught in my specific classes, that calendar would work really well. But I know that my experiences are not necessarily indicative of all of our stakeholders, which is why I think it's imperative to have that survey, as well as I know that a radical shift like the extended year calendar often has a lot of unintended consequences. And so a lot of my questions go through kind of trying to pick through some of those layers and have a complete understanding. So the first one is, are there any budgetary considerations that need to be made for an extended year calendar?
The one additional cost would come from teacher stipends for acceleration, remediation, enrichments during those intersessions. Research that was done by JLARC was actually a report to the Governor and General Assembly of Virginia back in 2011, said that the cost for staffing those intersessions and providing those services to students could run between 1% to 9% of the total per pupil expenditure. We do know these costs could be mitigated by securing a year-round grant through the VDOE. There is a $50,000 planning year grant, as well as a subsequent grant that schools can request up to $300,000 per school for a total of 3 years. I will say that I do know that we cannot access summer school funding for those intersessions, even though the intersessions might replace some of the need for summer school, a significant amount of need for summer school. So that would be the only cost I can think that I know of from the research I've read.
Dr. Tigan, when you talk about staffing for intersessions, would any of those intersessions be required for our students, or would they be optional, much the way that summer school would be?
They would be optional, but I would think, you know, students who are struggling academically would be encouraged through personal contact, just like we do for summer session,
Okay.
from the administrator and teachers.
Next, what educational evidence supports the move to an extended year calendar to fill gaps from this year, seen as actually the number of face-to-face days is a few less than a traditional calendar?
The academic case for an extended school year stems from studies that show that the achievement gap between low-income students and their higher income peers is exacerbated during the extended time between the end of the one school year and the start of the next. That summer slide, that comes from the same JLARC study. Year-round schedules can enrich students' educational experiences for allowing for the addition of intersessions and even the creative courses that it allows. Some argue that offering more regular breaks also prevents both teacher and student burnout from school. So they're more energized when they are in school.
Next, for our youngest learners and our exceptional education learners who may need more time to transition into and out of new routines as there are more breaks, I have concern that this may lead to lost time due to more upheaval in routine. Is there any data from schools currently using this model on those considerations?
I have not, was not able to find any information. I specifically looked for that in the research. But one of the things is that connecting some of the intersessions, 2 of the 3, to existing breaks, you already have that break in time that kids are in school. Yes, it's extended, but it's not an additional time. In hopes of maybe minimizing that, but there is no research on that.
So really we're looking at 1 additional break is what you're saying?
Correct. The
Okay.
fall break.
My next question is specifically pertains to high school. I think a lot of the examples we see of year-round and extended year school are in elementary school. But for high school students, extracurriculars play a huge part in the school experience, as well as their social emotional health. I have some concern and some interest about how sports would look when other VHSL counties are not on the same schedule. And if athletes are playing through the breaks, that they then essentially would be involved year-round in school and not receiving any breaks. Also, activities like marching band that depend on the weeks before school starts. Would this happen in July? Would this not happen? Would it be able to happen before or after school in August? Any ideas on what those would look like?
Fall athletes usually begin practice in early August right now, and the same is true for marching band. So those practices would probably line up better because they would line up with the school year rather than having to occur in the summer month. I would not anticipate moving them back to July. They would be aligned to the school day. And that also helps with students who want to participate in band or athletics who might not have transportation, because if they have transportation to school, they will be able to be there for the practices. And I will tell you, our athletes currently play through breaks, as there are tournaments that go on during winter break, during spring break. And so that's already a part of their life as an athlete.
Thank you, Dr. Teigen. Also, what other localities are considering this plan? So many childcare options and activities depend on a regional approach to fill needs, as well as a lot of our teachers and staff live in districts outside of Henrico, and having a vastly different schedule could provide a lot of challenges for these families.
Right. Currently, Chesterfield has Bellwood Elementary School that's in its 2nd year of being on an extended school calendar. Falling Creek Elementary School will be an extended year next year, and their intent is the following year to bring on the middle school, so it's within a feeder pattern. Hopewell has planned for an extended school year. They will be going division-wide extended school year for the 2020-2021 school year. And I know that Richmond is, recently said that they are looking at this option as well. for next year.
Thank you. That's the end of my questions. Just a few comments. You know, this would be a severe departure from what is typical in our area. And if this seems like the option that most of the board would like to pursue, the scientist in me needs to see some data and the pros and cons from school systems that have already implemented this calendar, especially for our most at-risk learners, and also for high school students, since a lot of the examples we see for this are elementary school. You know, Henrico trailblazes for a lot of things, which I love, but I feel strongly that a major shift like this needs to have regional buy-in. And right now, I don't know that we have enough regional players to make that happen. So I am eager to hear from other board members on their position, as well as I look forward to the input of the community. Just in the feedback that we've gotten for this meeting from the public, you can see that there's a wide variety of opinions. And so that survey is just imperative. Thank you, everyone, for your patience on all my many questions, and I yield the floor.
And Mrs. Shea, if I might interject, I think while we've directly answered, or Dr. Tigan directly answered the questions you posed, would just want to reiterate both to the board and to the public, as was discussed at the intro of the presentation, that certainly administration's recommendation for the board's consideration is draft B, and that's the one that is the traditional start, and that is related to a number of circumstances, including the ability to fully move our community along appropriately in a discussion. I think surveying is critically important, but recognizing that beyond simply asking people's opinion comes some opportunity to educate them on what the options really mean. And given the circumstances, I understand that both A and C are departures that are fairly significant from what has been expected. And while both may have merit for discussion, and I certainly appreciate the board's desire to discuss those given the circumstances at hand, would just again want to anchor the discussion and administration's recommendation being for the board's consideration of B. However, if to consider B seriously, that means collecting some survey data related to A and C, then certainly we defer to the board on that and look forward to hearing the thoughts of others.
Thank you so much, Dr. Cashwell, for your point of clarity. Thank you so much, Ms. Shea, for your comments. Let me just say, for a point of context, that we are reviewing the proposed 2021-2022 school calendar options, but approval will be requested at the May 28th meeting. So we're not approving it today, but we're sharing it for information purposes as well as for dialogue in regards to it. So that being said, I'm going to move from Ms. Shea now, go to Ms. Ogburn.
Mrs. Ogburn, you're muted.
I'm sorry. Thank you. I'll start again. I just wanted to thank Ms. Shea for all of the discussion points that she brought up, because there are those and many more, because she's right. We have already begun to hear from members of the public. I got a call from a teacher yesterday saying that, you gave me your number a long time ago, and I hope it's okay I use it, which of course it is. But I know our teachers are concerned about this, as is the public. And I would echo Marcy's call for a survey, but I would also like to see us form, I hate to say it, but form a committee, in addition, sort of an expanded calendar committee, to look at the possibilities of what other school districts are doing, possibly piloting a year like Chesterfield has done. Choose one of our schools to pilot this to see how it works for us, because I think Marcy's right. The regional concerns pop up for me first. For example, I'm chairman of the board at Maggie Walker, and so we have Maggie Walker, we have Code RVA, we have other regional programs that I think would be drastically affected. And the regional concern, I think, will come out real quickly from a survey. I think we would also, as Marcy pointed out, we have people who live in one county, work in another. We're going to have those issues. But I personally am thinking that right now there's so many things that people have to worry about. And it's such a time of upheaval that, next year in September, we start post-Labor Day as we had planned. And then see how next year develops, have the calendar committee do with maybe an expanded calendar committee, do the research, gather that data that Marcy is talking about, slice and dice a survey that we've done, and then we go forward. I just think that the staff recommendation is a good one. And but I do think that it's an ongoing discussion because we are the leaders. We are people who do things in a revolutionary way, but the core of it has to be able to meet the needs of our students, and the needs of our students are year round. So we do have to, if it's not a year round school option, maybe find an option that is somewhere in the middle where we meet the needs of students who need the help over the summer months. But with that, I'll just yield to someone else. But I think we do have to get that regional perspective and maybe some more information from the calendar committee.
Thank you so much, Ms. Ogburn, for your insight as well. Next, Ms. Kinsella.
Yes, thank you, Chair Cooper. I'd like to thank Marcy and Mickey for such substantial insights and questions about the calendar. I can tell you I heard from quite a few constituents in the short window of time, in addition to some that I heard from back in March when we first discussed it, prior to schools, prior to our buildings being closed. I agree with you, Mickey. Calendar decisions are typically aligned with as a part of regional conversations. I'm not opposed to a potential pilot conversation, but at this point, I think extended year school is not what our community members need. It's not what our teachers need. It's not what our parents need. I think that right now we have too much stress. And then when we do start school, hopefully in fall 2021, it won't be like fall like this year. So I'd like to eliminate whatever stress we can from our families. And I agree about feedback, because that's one of the things that actually was filling up my voicemail and inbox in terms of how can we have three such drastic options, and why is there such a rush to vote, or the board to potentially vote on May 28th. So if someone could please answer that question as to why it's being recommended we vote May 28th.
I can certainly speak to that. And again, while my recommendation is option B, as I stated, and that's what I'm seeking your vote on. However, board member questions leading up to this presentation were to include some other options, which included a look at a year-round calendar, as well as to reintroduce the pre-Labor Day calendar that we introduced back in March. And so that's why they were included for purposes of this discussion. And certainly if the will of the board is to postpone that vote and not move forward at that time, we certainly can do that. We committed to our community long ago in approving calendars that we would make decisions related to the start of the 21 school year in this time frame so that they could make plans. The last time we entered in a community conversation about this, and I know both Dr. Teigen and Mr. Jenks can fill in some of the blanks related to the timeline, because we have talked about a pre-Labor Day start before with our community, and feedback was, important that they knew long in advance, based on Labor Day vacation plans and home rentals and all of these things, that we make calendar decisions far enough in advance that they have that notice. So this was the window of time that had originally been communicated to our community in regards to making a decision far enough in advance for them to understand what the start of the 21 school year would look like. However, again, yield to the board's will if there's a desire to take a vote at a different time. But that's why it shows up in this time frame, based on ongoing conversations related to timelines for approving the calendar.
Do fellow board members feel as though May 28th is reasonable if we can get community feedback from a survey?
And I assume, if I might ask a clarifying question, if we're surveying the public related to A and C along with B, then it's the board's considering the potential of implementing A, B, or C seriously, then, you know, I would suggest that we look at extending that time frame, particularly because it sounds like there are a number of questions, even from board members, related to those options.
Well, then should we eliminate potentially the option C today, and then maybe just evaluating A and B?
Reverend Cooper, could I comment on that?
Yes, ma'am, Ms. Osborne, please be my guest.
Well, I actually would like to get an opportunity to speak before we start talking about different decisions that we want to make moving forward.
Okay, I'll yield to Ms. Atkins. Go right ahead.
Thank you, Mrs. Osborne. I just wanted to chime in a little bit, and I, number one, support Mrs. Shea in having a survey to find out what families want. I think that's the first step in making such a big decision like this that could impact locally and regionally. And therefore, one, we need family feedback for this. And just on that point alone, we want to give families the opportunity to complete a survey. I think if we are serious about getting information from the public, then we want to also give them the opportunity to complete the survey. And I think that takes longer than a week. And so, number one, I do think we should move the date for providing a decision back, just based on making sure that we can, one, offer time for folks to complete the survey, but then we need time to analyze the survey, and we need time to digest the survey as leaders to make sure that we are making the best decision possible. So those are my two thoughts on that. And then, as far as, I'll go ahead and answer your question, Christy, around option C and extended day. I do not believe we need to add one more thing to our family's plate, period. I will not vote for an option C at this time. I don't mind entertaining pulling a committee together, but I do believe pulling a committee together at this time is kind of difficult, given all the other decisions and activities that staff and families are engaging in right now. I think it's a wonderful idea. I'm just not sold that it's something that we need to do right now. I don't think it's high priority to pull a committee together to talk about an extended calendar. I think the priority is to get the community's feedback on the calendar that we're going to be voting on soon. And so that's my comment on that. I do want to talk to the public right now. I want to thank everyone for providing their comments to me about the calendar, in addition to the survey, which is very helpful, but there is nothing that's going to replace a conversation with families on how they feel and how they would be impacted by pre or post. And so for everyone watching, Highland Springs, Sanson, Verona, please continue to meet with me, have conversations with me. I'm going to do and explore every single communication medium possible to allow you to do that, because I know that it is a challenge for us to have face-to-face conversations right now. And on something as important as this calendar, please continue to reach out to me to have discussions about it in whatever fashion, way, or form that you can. Pastor Cooper, the floor is yours.
I believe Reverend Cooper has been disconnected and will be rejoining us. He's lost his internet connection. So we'll just pause as he's reconnecting.
I'm back.
Thank you, Reverend Cooper. And Mrs. Atkins just finished sharing her comments related to the importance of that community conversation around the calendar.
Is anybody else have any more comments on it?
I do, Reverend Cooper, if I could
Yes,
jump
ma'am.
back in.
If you could, yes, ma'am.
I agree with basically we're all kind of chiming in with the same sort of thought that if we are going to consider an extended school year, I think that is so far from ready for us to vote on. I don't know that if we delayed that to the fall, we would be ready. So my thought would be that at our next meeting, we're choosing between A and B. I think that is all that we have the information to choose from at this point. If we're going to vote this month, I think option C with an extended year, that takes a tremendous amount of planning, and that is just so not ready for prime time. But I would feel comfortable in 2 weeks voting between A and B. I don't know that our survey is if Mrs. Shea's survey idea really focused in on that, or I would be interested in knowing whether her information that she's looking for really is centering on a year-round effort, or is it really on the A and B? Because if, we've had a tremendous amount of time for people to have input between pre and post Labor Day start. The option C with the year round throws a tremendous monkey wrench in the whole thing. So I think my vote would be or my suggestion would be to take that off the table right now for anything we would vote on and choose between pre and post Labor Day. But I'm fine with putting that off till June or whatever anybody feels comfortable with.
If I may interject.
Yes, ma'am. Please go ahead.
I forgot to turn my camera on. Sorry. So if we take C off the table, I still think it's really important to have additional survey input between A and B, because I have talked to a lot of families and even in neighboring school districts that before were really opposed to a pre-Labor Day start, and now they're realizing, well, maybe that I do want a pre-Labor Day start, or vice versa. And so I think a lot of community opinion on this has shifted, and maybe I'm wrong, maybe it hasn't shifted, but I think we need the opportunity to look at if it has shifted, and if so, how it has shifted as a result of this COVID pandemic.
So, Mr. Chairman, if I might.
Please, because we want to get a consensus.
Well, it sounds like what I'm hearing from the board is that while we were asked to provide a view of what an extended year calendar might look like, just to aid in today's discussion, that's no longer an option that's on the table, and that we would like to focus on looking at calendar options A and B, surveying the public regarding the pre and post Labor Day start. And so that's certainly something we could do. I will add, and I could be mistaken, that I believe there's been some surveying done related to that before, and I've found a pretty split view across the community, and would say that while we did start some conversation with the community about the idea of a pre-Labor Day start, and it's not as drastic a shift as the option C we saw, it is a significant departure. And so my caution, and again, the reason my recommendation to the board regarding a calendar for the 2021 school year was to focus on calendar B, was still my concern that we can't fully educate the community about the pros and cons of each schedule, and can simply ask them the question. And so there's always the importance of asking and retrieving survey results, but when constituents haven't had an opportunity to really, again, attend information sessions and learn about what a pre-Labor Day start can do, I wonder if the vote isn't reflective of all the knowledge we'd want our folks to have, but certainly are prepared to put out a survey related to the pre and the post Labor Day start, and adjust the window of time beyond May 28th, should that be the board's will, to the June date.
Mr. Chairman, I just thought of one other thing I need to ask, if I can jump in one more.
Yes, please do.
I think one other thing we have to consider with a pre-Labor Day, post-Labor Day start is we have 3 schools who are supposed to open that September that we're talking about in 21. So I think part of our decision has to be, will those 3 schools be ready to open several weeks earlier? If they would not be, I think that would influence our decision greatly. Not that you want to affect the whole county for the status of 3 schools, but you know, under the circumstances with the economy like it is, I know that they're continuing on with all 3 projects, but maybe part of what the information we need right now is a status update of those 3 projects and a projection as to a completion date would help us inform our decision.
Well, and I think that's a great point, Mrs. Ogburn, and one we alluded to when we first presented option A and B, even prior to the COVID crisis. There was some concern that a pre-Labor Day start could impact the promise we made to those school communities to be in their new buildings in the opening of the 21 school year. So while those construction projects are on track right now, we understand that there is, given the situation with the economy, the potential for those to fall on or off schedule. And of course, that could happen even outside of a crisis for any number of reasons, weather related. But while they're on track today, I would have concern that we may not be able to stay on track. And of course, recognizing that even in the best case scenario, these were expedited projects that typically take longer than the timeline we allotted for delivering 2 new high schools in the fall of 21. And so in the original construction schedule, they were planned as if the move-in date was for a post-Labor Day start. And so, you know, there may be some adjusting that would need to happen related to not having folks move into the new buildings prior to that first day of school. So it's an important consideration, particularly for the 2021 year.
And Chairman Cooper, may I share a few remarks?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. So Dr. Cashwell, thank you for responding to Mickey's question. It is an excellent one. I think in addition to that, I'd love to share with the board some of the feedback that I've received just as recent as this week during my coffee and conversations gathering. And so that did come up, and I will tell you, every last person that was in that conversation agreed that they want something sort of normal to hold on to, which is that post-Labor Day start. And, you know, it wasn't a shocker for me. However, I do think sometimes, you know, if I went with my own thoughts, I would have said, well, let's do pre-labor. It gives our kids an opportunity to catch up. However, I don't sit in the seat to just represent my thoughts. I sit in the seat to represent an entire district, and we all sit in our seats to represent an entire district. And therefore, with the conversations that I've been having, that has been the steady trend. Please don't change anything, because that's something that we know how to plan to, because that's what it's been for so many years. And so I will share, if we did have to take a vote in May, I can already tell you it would be the post, it would be the B. I'm going to continue to get feedback, but that's the trend that I have seen thus far. Hearing that there's a possibility that any of these new schools, these schools that are in construction, would struggle more than what they are going to. There are going to be some things that happen because of the economy and delays. I do not want to add any more stress in those situations. And so that is actually something that has significantly made me want to say, if we need to vote, I can say right now confidently on behalf of my community, because I've had those conversations without a survey, that's what they would want. And it's also what I would want. And so I'm speaking to that because if we are questioning whether or not to move the date back, I think it's a healthy conversation we need to have. My comment earlier was, if we decide to do a survey, I would not use the past survey, because the past survey environment was critically different, significantly different when those folks were surveyed. So when you're answering a question, you're answering it usually based on your history and your current situation and what you predict for the future. I don't think that is the results of that survey is significant or irrelevant right now, because folks that would answer that survey certainly could not have predicted any of this, and we don't even have any history on this. So really, my response is, if we do push the date back for voting, it is only to allow time for folks to take the survey and to give time to analyze the results. Chairman Cooper, I'm done.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Atkins. Madam Superintendent, after hearing the dialogue and discussion, what is your recommendations before we can go forward?
Certainly, as I stated, administration's recommendation for a number of factors each board member has brought up related to whether it be some unknowns over the construction timeline specific to the 21 year, the inability to fully engage our community in dialogue, not just get input via a survey. Our recommendation is that the board consider option B, but if there is a feeling that it's time to have our community weigh in via a survey related to option A and B, we'll certainly be prepared to do that. So, I look to the board to guide us as to what would be preferable moving forward.
Well, it sounds like the consensus is they want a mechanism in place to garner and to get feedback. So we need to look at how we can do that.
So that I fully understand the ask, staff will prepare a survey for families to weigh in on options A and B, a pre and post Labor Day start for the 21 school year, and have that data to the board prior to May 28th, so that you can consider. So for May 28th, you'll be considering that feedback as you vote related to the calendars.
Ms. Shea, is that amenable for you?
Yes, sir. That's fantastic. Thank you.
Ms. Kinsella, is that amenable for you?
I would agree with that, as long as it's very clear that option C is taken off the table. Yes, I'm okay with that, because we have done surveys in the past. We do a survey every time we make a calendar decision. We always provide the public with a survey. And we did receive so much feedback already that, pre or post Labor Day is a conversation we've been having for a couple of years, depending on the year. So I'm fine with it. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Mrs. Ogren.
I'm fine with it as well. It comes back to us by the next meeting, but I would challenge Mr. Jenks to make an all call to like all the homes, or put it out on social media that we're doing this. 2 weeks is not a lot of time to do a survey and to get the results back and to analyze them. So we're talking about a short window here. So it's going to take some media help to get the word out that we're even doing a survey at this point in time. I think that may be hard to get people to understand what we're doing.
Well, and I would add that certainly, around the messaging, while again, it's not introducing an option C, it is a departure for the community. And I think that while in putting out a survey that shows a pre and a post for the 21 school year, I think while families will respond, there are going to be some strong feelings out there. And I would imagine the board will hear from a good number of folks, since we haven't spent a lot of time with our community on that pre-Labor Day conversation, because we closed when we would have been engaging them in that dialogue. So for some families, the first they're going to hear of this is via survey. And I just want to make that clear to the board. I think the reaction could be strong in some cases because we haven't had an opportunity to dialogue as we typically would.
Thank you so much, Madam Superintendent. Ms. Atkins, are you amenable to it as well?
And so I have I agree with the survey, but I'm going to reiterate, when we are doing polls or surveys, the results are only as good as the understanding of the questions. And I say that very strongly because 2 weeks is not a lot of time. When you're asking someone a question, they have to understand the background and the impact before they answer the question, or otherwise the results that we receive won't truly help us. They won't be as genuine as what I would hope we would want them to be. And so to Mickey's point, we are going to have to be incredibly creative and intentional, because just because you're going to send out a survey, if we don't adequately educate folks on the implications of the calendar, if we don't adequately share that if we do we want to tell folks, well, that might impact construction. It may. So my point to you is, I am okay with doing a survey if it's done in a very genuine way that educate folks on the questions that they are answering. If you just send a survey with a paragraph, hey, pick one, the results aren't going to be meaningful because folks may not have the understanding of the impacts. And it does take time to educate folks. We've been on this call having this topic for several minutes, and we have all engaged in it. This is an example. And I don't want to continue to stay on this topic, but I just want you to know how passionate I am that you don't just send out a survey and ask folks to answer a question in 2 weeks without educating them and empowering them to understand the meaning behind the question. And 2 weeks is not a lot of time. So to make this point, we're going to have to use every single medium possible to educate folks first before giving them a survey. You can't just say, hey, guys, take this survey, tell us what you think, because the results are not going to be as meaningful as they would be if they were educated about the topic.
Yeah, I think great point, Mrs. Atkins, and certainly why our initial plan had a number of face-to-face community forums, you'll recall, before we would have looked to get to a vote at this point. Again, why I pulled the pre-Labor Day option off the table as far as my recommendation goes, because I worry about being able to have that dialogue. But it sounds like there's certainly interest on the part of the board in hearing the community's thoughts related to pre and post Labor Day at this point in time. So I certainly can say that, staff and I can work on drafting a survey and sharing that with the board and see if it may meet your needs in the next day or so, and determine whether maybe once you see what a draft looks like, whether that's the direction you still want to go. And we can certainly wait to hear from you on that front.
So, Madam Superintendent, let me say this because I want to move on from this discussion. Can you please expeditiously develop the survey, send it to us, allow us to look at it and get feedback, and then we'll move forward from there. Can you do that for me?
Yes, I will provide a survey looking at pre and post Labor Day.
Sounds good. Thank you so much, Madam.
Reverend Cooper, I know we want to move on, not to belabor this point, but may I add one more thought?
Yes, ma'am, Ms. Shea, you can.
So I certainly hear Ms. Atkins' concerns, and if I don't know if we feel like some sort of virtual town hall on the subject would provide adequate education for our community, but I personally don't feel comfortable voting on the calendar without community input. So I don't know what we've got to do to get from point A to point B to educate our community appropriately, but I personally feel that public input is essential, and post-COVID public input, as opposed to just looking at our pre-COVID input, is essential. And I'll stop on that.
And again, I just want to be clear that I would be asking for a vote on calendar B, but the board would like to also consider A, and therefore need the input to make the vote.
Yes. And Reverend Cooper, if you don't mind, I'm going to jump in and make a suggestion that, I don't know, might help all of this. It seems to me that there is some concern about, obviously from Ms. Atkins has expressed so well, the concern about 2 weeks is not a lot of time. Dr. Cashwell, is there any rush while we have to vote in May? Could we put the vote off till June on the calendar to our first meeting in June, and give us a little more time to educate the public on the survey and what we're asking them to tell us about? Does it really make a difference if we put it off and do this in 4 weeks as opposed to 2?
I think it's certainly, we can postpone it and make it clear to the public. I know this is a highly anticipated outcome. A number of our families have been asking whether we would be moving to a pre or post Labor Day for the 21 year, and we had given them a time frame in which we'd make that decision, but we're not extending it drastically to go from the last meeting in May to that next meeting in June. So, I mean, certainly if that's the board's will, we will extend that. I won't ask for a vote until the following meeting, so that allows more time to survey and perhaps provide some opportunities to do more than survey, but also share information with our families related to what a pre-Labor Day start might entail.
I think that's a good compromise, Madam Superintendent. Does that meet your criteria, Ms. Ogburn?
Absolutely. I think it would help, and I think it would help with educating our families. I think Alicia's point is absolutely spot on, that we have to tell them what the pros and the cons to this change are, but it also achieves what Ms. Shea is trying to achieve in getting feedback. So delaying to the first meeting in June, there's not a whole lot of difference. And if we make it known that transparency and communication is the reason for the delay, people will go, good, I'm glad you did that.
If I may, Chair Cooper?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am, Ms. Kinsella.
Just to fully support what Ms. Ogburn just said, just to transparency and full disclosure, make it very clear that these are the two options, because we have had people, I know personally, I've heard quite a bit about the calendar conversation and folks wanting to know, as a lot of folks are put in a position with COVID this summer, they're looking at rescheduling, rebooking, and credits being issued for next summer for vacations that were supposed to happen this summer. So I just want it to be as clear as possible that we will vote in June and that we've extended it, because the original vote actually was supposed to be April 23rd, if I'm not mistaken. So just as long as we can make it clear that we've extended it, and the difference here is just a rollback of 2 weeks or post Labor Day. So thank you, Chair.
Yes. Okay, Dr. Cashwell.
Yes, draft survey will be forthcoming to the board, and we'll not be seeking a vote until June. So does that conclude questions related to the calendar item?
That would be our June 18th meeting, correct?
Yes.
That's correct. Yeah, I was just pulling the calendar to see. Exactly right, the 18th.